there's all this, to me, sort of false drama about deployment versus innovation versus whatever. To my mind, and I think to your mind, this is hardly an either-or situation, first of all. Is that fair to say?
It's not even hardly either or. It's an and or won't get done.
Right. Now, a couple of questions about how this has been put in context. And I will specify Joe Rahm because he was so aggressively critical of what I wrote in pulling together some thoughts from some of the authors and others. He pointed back to the history of California doing such a great job at trimming its intensity. You know, it's basically the Europe of the United States in terms of per capita emissions. Now, what does that say? How would you compare what California did in the last 30 years with what would have to happen, what you've described here, in terms of order of magnitude? Or, you know, is this just more of the same, or is this really a fundamentally different kind of exercise you've laid out?
Oh, it's very clear if you just look at the measures that would be needed in the report that this is a fundamental change in the way that we use, consume, pay for, and live with our energy services and supply. It is not close. It's not necessarily bad. It may be better,
Sure.
But it is not close to the way that we have evolved or on a learning curve that we're evolving to now. Technically, more of the cost-effective, quote, easy stuff, you could argue, has been already done in California. Therefore, in terms of actually what's needed to push the technical envelope and also on the cost curve, you could argue that California has already picked the fruit off the ground and got some low-hanging that the other states haven't and therefore could be advantageously do. All that's going to do in the end is make the amount that they have to deploy and work even harder because they have to get to where California is, where we already are, and that's going to take them a while, and then they still have to go where we have to go.
Right.
So, yes, it's on a cost basis. We've already done some of the easy stuff, but, you know, we've already lapped them in the race, and in the end, they have to catch up.
How important is it to factor in building our intellectual infrastructure, even as we work on these questions about changing our energy infrastructure?
Sure.
I've made this point over and over on my blog. It seems always to be tertiary or not on people's lists, including people who claim to be very worried about global warming. You know, I wrote when Obama did his green jobs push, I said, are chemists and engineers on the green jobs list? And the answer was essentially no. And I see not even half of the hubs funded.
Here's my measure. First of all, absolutely, because you cannot get to where we need to go with just what we know how to do today, which means we need to learn how to not only evolve faster, better, cheaper what we know how to do today, we also need to do things we don't know how to do today. That doesn't mean you don't start now doing what you know how to do. It does mean that you shouldn't have your head in the sand and know that 40 yards away you can't get from here to there because the Grand Canyon's in between and you never built a bridge. All right? So good policy, if you really cared about meeting the target, if you really cared about making sure that the odds were stacked in your favor, if that were really what you cared about, you would be deploying, you would be lowering costs, and you would be having multiple options to figure out a way to do the stuff that we don't know how to do so that we would succeed. If you don't care about succeeding and you just care about pushing your own agenda, then you would leave out that last key step, and I'm not willing to bet the earth on leaving it out. All right? We have a $1.5 trillion a year energy industry just in the United States. If you look at the percentage of revenue devoted to R&D by industries that have to run fast or die, like pharma, they got to run fast or die because the bugs then beat their antibiotics. Like IT, when if they don't run fast or die, somebody else runs faster, some other company, some other country. It's between 10 and 15% of revenue goes into R&D to run fast or die. By that measure, we should be spending $150 billion a year on energy R&D to run fast or die. Now you can say maybe the private sector should be spending 2/3 of that. That still leaves $50 billion a year. Maybe that's too high. Cut it by 2. You're $25 billion a year on R&D, and that's actually comparable to NIH, which I think is the right measure because we care about developing a new generation of medical technology, so we resource it in a way that says we care. Right. We don't even spend $2 billion a year on clean energy R&D in our country, so unless we get the number up to something like 20, 30, or $50 billion a year, we are, based on tried and true business practices, very unlikely to be able to meet the technology pace of change that will be needed. And so just using standard business practices, we are not going to get from there to here if we don't have a robust, healthy R&D portfolio at about that level to support this industry change. I do think there is good scientific reason to be concerned, and I'm careful. We don't know exactly what the climate will be like in 2050 until we get to 2050 and look outside. We do know that from what we can tell, we know from science that the CO2 levels, if we stopped cold turkey then, wouldn't come back to where they were 20 years ago for 10,000 years. We do know that best scientific knowledge says that if we continue to acidify the oceans, that there won't be hardly any regions of our oceans that can support historically coral reefs, and that it'll take 2 million years to recover. There are a variety of other effects that we don't know what they will be or how long they will last. We just do know that we are going to go to a place that we're not going to be able to get out of if we don't like what we get. So on that basis, this is much more a question of, do you feel lucky, punk, with the Earth, the one home we have, right? If you want to roll the dice, then you do what you're doing. And I think it's pretty interesting that people that call themselves by label, quote, conservatives are the big gamblers here, and the people that want to see the planet the way we got it from our parents and theirs and keep it the way it is are called the non-conservatives. In this particular debate, it's being mislabeled.